What is my favourite video game of all time? Is it Mario Odyssey with its incredible platforming challenges, beautiful kingdoms, and brilliant OST? Well, I mean, it's a great game, but no. What about something like Sonic Generations? Well, again, pretty good game, and although it's my favourite Sonic game, I wouldn't consider it my favourite in terms of every single game of all time. How about Xenoblade Chronicles 3? It has a really great cast and a beautiful story that genuinely made me tear up. I love XC3, but it's my second place. No. My favorite game of all time currently is Spider-Man Miles Morales. Which sounds a bit insane, but just let me explain. First, let me set up some background. Upon the astounding success of the first game in the Insomniac Games Marvel Universe, as well as its DLC, the team then got to work on developing the next games for the Spider-Man franchise. One of which was Spider-Man Miles Morales, a spin-off game focused on, you'll never believe this, Miles Morales, was released as a launch title for the PS5 on November 12th, 2020. But the question remains, did the game manage to live up or even exceed the status of the first game, or was it just a rushed out side game that only existed to give people content during the wait for Marvel Spider-Man 2? Well, you saw the title, and heard the intro paragraph, so let's look at how good Miles Morales truly is, almost 3 years after release. The story of this game takes place 10 months after the end of the first game. Peter and MJ are now dating again, and Miles has pretty much finished training with Peter and is now helping him with proper crimes and villains. In terms of story, there's not as much to talk about as there was with the first game. Unfortunately, the story is the weakest part of the entire game. It essentially just takes the story beats from the first game and puts them into this with its own spin. However, at the same time, because it's not only a spin-off, but essentially an origin for Miles, this leads to the story being a lot more lighthearted as well. Which I gotta say, I do kind of prefer. The shorter, more lighthearted approach leads to this game being far more replayable, in my personal opinion. The main villain of this game is the Tinkerer, and no, they aren't the one you're thinking of. The Tinkerer in this game is Finn Mason, who definitely doesn't live up to the hype of someone such as Doc Ock. But I gotta say, I still like her as a character. She's got a pretty cool design, and she proves to be a challenge for Miles throughout the game. Speaking of her and Miles, their relationship is pretty cute, but it's kinda confusing. Like, the game feels like it doesn't really know what it wants their relationship to be at times. It'll have times when it'll hint at something romantic, like that bit after Christmas dinner at the sink, and then it'll do a complete 180 and feel like it wants to hint at a sibling kind of relationship. Like in the character bio for Finn, of which all character bios are written by Miles, he states, "It doesn't feel right to call Finn a friend, she's more like my sister." So it just feels like the game is confused on what their relationship is. As much as I didn't like how they handled MJ's story in the first game, the relationship between her and Peter was at least very clear. Though, despite my issues with Finn and Miles' relationship, I do think her sacrifice is pretty well earned. Even though she cares for Miles, she has justifiable reasons to not want to listen to him, and when she sees that what Miles is saying is true, she comes to the realization that by letting the Nuform reactor explode, it would make her worse than Roxxon, as she would wipe out Harlem entirely. Her choosing to save Miles and sacrificing herself not only sends her off as a hero, but brings their friendship to a satisfying conclusion, which I will admit it is neat how it parallels the ending of Peter and Otto's friendship. Instead of ending in hatred and anger, it ends in respect and closure between the two. Though unfortunately, we have another villain to talk about. These games seem to like having two main villains. In the first game, you have Mr. Negative and Doc Ock. In the sequel, we're gonna have Venom and Kraven the Hunter. In this game, you have the Tinkerer, who is actually a decent villain, and you've got Simon Krieger, who sucks. Meet Spider-Man's scariest villain. Rich white guy. Like, jokes aside, this is literally all he is. He has no redeeming qualities, his design sucks, and you don't even get to fight him. He's literally just a dude. And yeah, I get it to be accurate to real life, but come on man, it's a Spider-Man game. Give him a mech suit or some shit. Literally anything to make him interesting. Instead, he's just kinda there. The game tries to play him off as threatening, but it doesn't work because, like, if I get my hands on this dude, he's going out in one punch. He's literally defeated by Uncle Aaron telling the cops that he's a shitty person. This is the lamest and most uninteresting villain ever. Speaking of Uncle Aaron, however, he is one of the best parts of this game. The game builds up to him being the Prowler all throughout, and when he finally reveals his identity, it's a pretty decent reveal. I know people don't like the militarized designs of this universe, but I think it makes a ton of sense for the Prowler. He's a highly wanted thief that literally no one could ever catch, not even his own brother. It makes sense he wants to prioritize being as high-tech as possible. Yeah, his comic suit is goofy as fuck, and it's a great suit, but I don't mind him being more techy and militarized either. He as an actual character is great though. It's made very clear he's just doing what it takes to survive, even if what he's doing is illegal. And the game never pushes you to a point where you hate him, but to where you can understand and sympathize with him even if he is in the wrong. Despite the story being weak, it does actually have a main theme, family, which makes a ton of sense. This game takes place less than a year after Jefferson Davis had died. Miles' personal struggles come from having to fight Finn, who again, even if the relationship is a little confusing, he sees as a sister, as stated in the character bio, and he also has to deal with Uncle Aaron being the Prowler and being overprotective of Miles because he's afraid to lose him the way he lost Jefferson. And Rio Morales is fighting against Roxxon throughout the entire game, and Miles worries she'll get hurt, which she does, but she chooses to get back up from. Finn herself is also dealing with family issues. We learn that her brother, Rick Mason, died before the events of the game started because of Simon Krieger, and she joined the Underground in order to take Roxxon down. The entire reason she wants to destroy Roxxon is because of what they did to Rick. The post-game keeps this theme too. The post-game isn't massive, it takes about 10 minutes to complete, but it's genuinely cute as hell. It involves doing a scavenger hunt Jefferson set up for Miles' 16th birthday, but they never ended up doing because of the City Hall incident in the first game. It's genuinely great because we get to see Miles hear his dad one last time. It's a cute side mission and a good send-off to Jefferson. I'm glad they included it. The side story of this game is where the story, and in my opinion the entire game, really shines. In the last video where I spoke about Spider-Man 2018, I kinda forgot to talk about the side missions, which, yeah, is my fault 100%. However, the reason I think I forgot about them is because the side missions aren't all that memorable in that game. You've got some cool ones, like the Tombstone plot, but the rest are kinda your standard side missions. The side missions in Miles Morales are a lot different. There's two types of side missions. There's the ones that are self-contained, and ones that are part of a larger plot. The self-contained ones are pretty cool because when you help everyone, you get the Uptown Pride suit, which is Miles' main suit, but colored gold. The self-contained missions can be numerous things, ranging from looking for cats to stopping bank heists, sometimes both. All of which are pretty fun because you've also got characters like Howard, aka the Pigeon Guy, returning from the first game. These ones take place all over Manhattan instead of just Harlem. The connected ones are far more interesting though, because these again have returning characters and new ones to meet too. I highly recommend doing these ones before you beat the story, because the payoff will be a lot better, but you can do them anytime. All of these revolve around helping out around Harlem, so unlike the connected ones, these all take place in a single district of New York, which I gotta say is really interesting. Peter helped out with stuff, but he was never really one to connect with New York. So to have a younger Spider-Man out there actually connecting with the city and the people that inhabit it is really great to see. Peter is a good Spider-Man, but Miles is the people's Spider-Man. They even say that in the game. In the final side mission, We've Got a Lead, Haley says that people are even calling you our Spider-Man. Even if the main story has issues and turns out just okay at best, it's not awful, and the side quests do a lot to make up for it. With that said, let's move on. So, just like we did in the first game, let's start with the traversal. The traversal gameplay in this game is pretty good. It's not too different from the first game, but the minor changes they made make the swing far more fun and unique. For starters, Miles has updated animations when it comes to tricks, and it feels a lot better to use. In the first game, Peter had very basic tricks, only really having around 5 in total that weren't really unique and just basic stuff such as rolls. In Miles Morales, you have about 20 tricks to do, all with their own very distinct animations. They even have dives, which allow you to do a trick off of a building. It's the small things that really make Miles' swinging feel way more fun and unique compared to Peter's. Miles also can use his bioelectricity or venom while swinging. He can use it to either propel forward or burst upwards. Either way, it's definitely a cool addition, even if it doesn't add that much. Hopefully we see it expanded on in Spider-Man 2 though. Speaking of bioelectricity, let's talk combat. Just like the swinging, the combat in this game is mostly the same, but there's been a lot more changes compared to swinging. For example, compared to the first game's 8, the gadgets have been reduced down to only 4. And honestly, I think this is a good change, but the one issue I have is that I wish they kept the 8 but reduced the slots we have down to 4, because while the gadgets we have are fine, they aren't very fun to play with. The web shooters and remote mines are pretty fun, but the holo drones and gravity wells aren't the most interesting. Holo drones make the game far easier than it should be, and gravity wells just don't have that much use other than being funny. The only ones I see myself using are obviously the web shooters and also the remote mines when I'm able to. But even the remote mines aren't most useful because they're kinda situational, so you're only ever going to be getting the most out of them in side missions or main story quests, where there are electrical outlets you can place them on. You can place them directly onto enemies, but unless you're trying to do stealth, there's really no reason to use them, as the bioelectricity does the same thing, and is far more overpowered. Also, suit powers are also gone unfortunately, and they've been replaced by visor mods, which is really weird. It's basically just more suit mods, but the game plays them off as completely different. I don't know why they had to make a separate thing and decrease the suit mod slot, when they could have just grouped them together and given suit mods an extra slot instead of decreasing it. I don't know, man. I know it's kind of a nitpick, but still. And yeah, let's talk about that venom slash bioelectricity. This is easily the most in-depth thing when it comes to the new combat features. There's a lot to do with it. There's the basic venom punch, then you get the dash, the jump, the fucking mega venom blast. It's all pretty cool, and I love the look of it all. But I'd be lying if I didn't mention that the venom is kind of busted. You can get it in multiple ways: air tricks, fighting enemies, perfect dodges, etc. It's really easy to get, and because of that you can just bully enemies with it. Hell, the Mega Venom Blast just one-shots everyone in range. It's not even that funny. Even the Venom Jump is fucked, as you end up being able to one-shot enemies in the air. And no, this isn't an easy mode thing. I went into Spectacular and literally the same thing happened. Yeah, it's obviously you getting more skills and leveling up more, but I feel like there should still be some sort of difficulty, especially on the hardest modes. In terms of combat, there's one more thing to talk about, and that's stealth, which actually has been slightly improved on from the first game. For a bit of background, first of all, instead of prisoner bases, Sable outposts, etc., we've got Roxxon labs and underground hideouts. In the first game, after a certain point, the enemies would automatically detect you, making using stealth for the entire base literally impossible. In this game, you can do every single base without being detected, and it's great. I don't know why it took them so long to add this, but I'm happy they did. Stealth also takes more of a focus here, because one of Miles' abilities is the ability to camouflage, leading to some fun bits and side quests where you have to camouflage in order to get close-ups of enemies and sneak past police. It's also used to get a time capsule, which I'll speak more about later, though I wish there was more of this in the main story. Could make for some pretty fun level gimmicks. We get tastes of this, but not much. The one time we do get an entire thing dedicated to sneaking around is literally 2 levels before we actually get access to camouflage. Other than those things though, stealth is practically the same and not much different from Spider-Man 2018. However, there isn't any human stealth thankfully, which is always a positive. Before we move on, I want to just talk about the enemy bases in full. So honestly, I think these are kind of neat. They keep the spirit of the first game and add on to it. You've got the Underground taking over all the Wilson Fisk construction sites, and Roxxon setting up bases under gas stations for some reason. They aren't too different from the first game, but they do have stuff such as underground caches, which are required for 100% completion, so they're worth replaying if you miss any. They've also got some cool interactions, and the Roxxon bases have lore bits that I think are cool. So overall, they're a good time if you're interested in more combat. Alright, so the rest of the game. So obviously, because this is a far smaller game, there isn't as much to do. However, there is some stuff to talk about. So, to start off, replacing the Taskmaster challenges, we now have Spider Training, a bunch of challenges set up by Peter to help Miles hone his skills. There's 3 categories: combat, stealth, and swinging, and 3 challenges for each of them. For completing each challenge, you get a new skill, which is a great idea, as aside from the activity tokens, this makes for another cool incentive. The challenges themselves are pretty diverse as well. In the first game, the categories were all pretty much the same thing. For the bombs, you had to obviously disarm bombs. Drone, you had to chase a drone while zipping through points to get a high score. Combat, you had to take down all the enemies. Stealth, you had to also take down every enemy but without being spotted. In this game, each challenge has a specific gimmick. For example, in the second combat challenge, you have to take down enemies without being hit. 3 hits and you have to restart. But in the third one, you have to get a specific amount of air KOs, as enemies can only be damaged while in the air. In the second stealth challenge, you have to save hostages without being spotted. In the third stealth challenge, you have to disarm bombs. This really helps to make the challenges stand out more and feel less samey. For completing all of these, you get a great boss fight with a hologram vulture, as Peter tries to replicate their first fight. You can replay this anytime, though for some reason it doesn't appear on the map. Some more things you can do in the open world include collecting time capsules. Time capsules essentially serve as the backpacks of this game, and I gotta say, they're just as good as those. Actually, they're better because they include a reference to the hit Marvel icon, Big Wheel. Okay, but no, these actually have some cool stuff, and tell us things about the relationship between Finn and Miles. It's also got mentions of Thor and a Wakanda Easter egg. Also in the open world, there's underground caches, which I mean, are alright. They'll sometimes have underground enemies guarding them, but most of them don't. And for collecting all of them, you do get a cool suit. I also want to talk about the sound samples, which are a neat thing Uncle Aaron tasks you with. Too bad the song you end up making is absolute ass. Like, what the fuck were they cooking here?
Use the sounds.
We also have JJJ returning, which is pretty neat. His podcast is fun as always. And we've also got a new podcast by the name of Danicast, run by Danica Hart. And, she's okay, I guess. She's meant to serve as a podcast for Miles to listen to, and a rival/opponent for Jonah. But she's basically just a regular podcast, nowhere near as fun as Just the Facts. Having an alternative is an alright decision, but I also wouldn't have cared if they kept JJJ as the main podcast. Finally, I want to talk about some of the quality of life changes that were made from the first game. First of all, we can finally replay missions. Thank fucking God. This seems like a small thing, but for me it was a big thing, because the first game had some really cool missions that you can't redo without playing the entire game again. This game just lets you replay story missions and any of the side missions whenever you like, as well as the fact that you can pick any crime to fight whenever you like as long as there isn't a crime going on at the time. They also made it so you no longer have to go to a research station to change the time of day. You can now just change it whenever in the settings, and you can also change the weather. There's also been some major UI changes, such as the skill tree being completely different, and the social media tab getting its own fully dedicated section instead of being only on the map. And by the way, the social tab is still peak fiction, highly recommend giving it a read. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot to mention that the character bio section now has a model viewer, so you can view the models of pretty much all of the main characters and enemies, whereas SM 2018 had static images. They also improved the photo mode a bit, and it was a big enough change to where they also added it to the remastered version of Spider-Man 2018, and I gotta say, it's deserved. The photo mode is so much better. You can change suits within the photo now, and you can also mess with the lighting of the city and add your own lights. Now, all I'm hoping is they update the photo mode in Spider-Man 2 to be similar to what Hi-Fi Rush has, as that game has the perfect photo mode in my opinion.
Now arriving, 125th Street. Be advised, unscheduled service disruptions are affecting the Harlem Line.
Do I really need to say it? I will anyway, because John Persano is back, and this man just can't stop cooking. God damn, this OST is so fucking good, I need it injected into me. And I mean like, dead ass, I need that in my veins, bro. Hell, I would argue that this game has a better soundtrack than Spider-Man 2018. Just like that game, I loved every song in this OST, but I come back to this soundtrack far more. Probably because I feel it just appeals to me more than the first game's OST does. Not all a bad thing for the first game, it's just Miles' soundtrack is more fit to my tastes. And I think that's because Miles' soundtrack is pretty youthful. It's really upbeat and energetic, and you can tell that with both the main theme titled Don't Give Up and the swinging theme titled New York's Only Spider-Man. I also like the 3 vocal tracks we got for this game by Jaden and Lecrae. I have no clue if I'm saying that right, I'm probably saying it wrong, but who cares. Jaden has I'm Ready and Lecrae did This Is My Time and Where We Come From. All 3 are great songs, and I'm not really sure which one is my favourite. I obviously can't play any of them because I'd like to keep my channel a little longer, but I do recommend listening to them in your own time if you haven't already. It does make you wonder if we'll get vocal songs for Spider-Man 2 as well though.
Hey, get out of here, kid. We'll take care of them.
Did you see his face?
You did good, Spider-Man.
Thanks.
Who is he?
That guy? He's our Spider-Man.
So, you're probably thinking, I criticized the game quite a bit in this video. So, how is it my favorite game of all time? Well, it's just a guilty pleasure, really. And keep in mind, the game is still great and improves on a lot of the stuff the first game had, such as the stealth, the UI, the swinging, the photo mode, etc. It's all great stuff and keeps me coming back to the game all the time. This game being set in Christmas has made it a yearly tradition for me to replay this game every year for the holidays. The story could absolutely be better, but for a small spin-off game that didn't have as nearly as much development time compared to the first game, I can look past it. And either way, the side quests still make up for this a lot with its sense of community and how you see Miles become the people's Spider-Man. Spider-Man Miles Morales may be a spin-off game, but it is one that truly has its own sense of style and distinctiveness that sets it apart from its predecessor. Even if it's not perfect, it truly does inspire the player to reach out of your comfort zone and be yourself.
We'll add it to the Spider-Man oath. Go time? Go time.